Hello, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining for another episode of the Policy Panchayat, where we interact with very interesting people doing important work all across the policy space in their own capacities. Today, we have a very interesting guest, Sohini Mookherjee, someone I have looked up to in the broader research space for sure. Have heard a lot about, and I'm just so glad that she's made the time to be with us today. Right, Sohini is a senior manager with JPAL, right, in India and South Asia, and we'll ask her to give an introduction herself. But before she does that, as always, if you have any feedback, any questions, any queries, all in the comments, please. And anyone else, any other guests we should get, any other subject we should cover, let us know in the comments. Do share the video if you found it of value. And with that out of the way, we'll just get into the conversation. Sohini, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Why don't you tell us a little more about yourself first?
Firstly, thank you so much, Yash, for having me here, and thank you for your time. And a very hi to all our guests. So, a very quick introduction to who I am. So, as Yash mentioned, my name is Sohini. I work as a senior training manager with Clear South Asia and JPAL South Asia. So, just a very quick introduction of what JPAL and Clear are as entities. So, Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, or JPAL, is basically a global research center that is working to reduce poverty by ensuring that the policy is informed by scientific evidence. Okay? And basically, it's an affiliate of professors. We have more than 290 affiliates as of now, and this is based at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the Economics Department, which was co-founded by our co-founders, Abhijit and Esther, who won Nobel for their contribution on running randomized evaluations to answer particular policy relevant questions. So that is the JPAL side of my affiliation, which is our host institution. And I also work with the CLEAR initiative. So basically, just a quick introduction of what CLEAR is. So CLEAR is actually a global program that is coordinated by the Independent Evaluation Group at World Bank. And their broader mission is to kind of strengthen monitoring and evaluation systems in countries. And we have several CLEAR centers, at least 6 CLEAR centers based in different academic institutions. The South Asia Center is actually hosted by JPAL. So basically, I have this dual affiliation because of that. And under this broader kind of work, what I essentially do is I work very closely with government, with civil society, with research institutes, with young scholars, such as some of your audience members, to kind of help them understand monitoring and evaluation and kind of train them and also capacity building support on monitoring and evaluation. So that's like the broader overview of what I do.
That's very helpful, Sohini. And there's so much to unpack there. But given the sheer breadth of all that you do, I've come with a few set of questions. In fact, these are those that we have received from our audiences, right? That they would love to ask from you. So first things first, can you give us an overview of policy research, right? And broadly, just to add on to that, in a sense, its importance and the role that it has come to play today in policy design, implementation.
Absolutely. So I think when you think of public policy, it's almost like almost like a behemoth. There's so much that is there, right? So it essentially, if you have to kind of simplify, it is basically a set of actions, whether it's plans, whether it's laws, whether it's behavior, which is basically adopted by the government, right? And essentially, if you are a student of public policy, what you are essentially doing is you are attempting to devise solutions to policy problems, or else you are essentially trying to understand government's response towards them or try to advise government in the right direction. Of course, there again, you have several avenues. You can have solutions which are aimed at a particular policy problem. So, for example, say the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, they want to improve learning outcomes of students in Bareilly. As of today, they have, how do they do it, right? So there can be multiple options that they can do. They can provide free uniforms, free textbooks. They can provide midday meals. These are all government programs that has happened in various parts of the world, right? So which is that one program that they should do, which will be the biggest bang for the buck, right? So essentially for a government, that's a very important question because, as students of economics, we know that there are unlimited ones, but limited resources. So how do you use the resources in the right aspect, in the right direction, in the right way? So that's like the one piece of the thing where you're essentially helping government answer a specific policy issue or challenge. There can be other issues which are more coming from an academic perspective, where you're essentially trying to understand the generic question and how the state should seek to implement its policies, which are more on a broader research side of things. And here again, you can have the policy implication side where researchers can run programs, but essentially when you then work with government, how does that take up happen? Right? How do you help the government unpack essentially how do you help the government understand the program, and how do you help the government give the right set of policy recommendations from the research that you have done? So you can actually go both ways.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, I feel as students of public policy, there are again a number of other things that you can essentially look at, right? So you have multiple stakeholders in this ecosystem, right? You can work with implementing organizations. For example, you have someone like, say, Pratham, they have the Learn to Lead program, the ASER survey that they do, which is more on the implementation space. You have donor organizations, like, for example, Gates Foundation. They invest a lot on health, particularly in states of UP and Bihar, right? So you can also work with Gates, with Central Spell Foundation. So there are these options on the donor side. You also have international organizations like UN agencies, right, or World Bank, or UNICEF, UNESCO, etc., etc. Yeah. Then you have research institutes, right, such as JPAL, who work in the research space. And then you have, say, a broader set of organizations that work on the M&E space. So I think again, as students, we can also think from whether we want to do something which is more sector agnostic, which is something like M&E, which you can, monitoring and evaluation is by the very definition, it is something that is sector agnostic, but you can also have interest which is more specific to a sector, right? For example, you may be interested in health, you may be interested in education, in energy, climate change, etc., whatever interests you. So I think that more broadly would be how I would think of public policy. I would also say that there is also the other route, which is essentially if someone wants to become an IS officer. That's the other route, when they are themselves taking part in policy formulation. So that's the other route that you can also go through, and there you again have the civil service exam, and you get into the system of being the administrative officer.
Right. Okay. Absolutely. If you can just build on that itself, right, Sohini, and what JPAL is most well known for, also that's one of the things I know the organization does, is RCTs, right? It's almost like you've mainstreamed this particular concept and area of study and way of conducting research, if I can put it that way. So for the uninitiated, right, for audiences who are not very well maybe versed, and honestly I myself don't know enough about this. What are RCTs? How do they work, and maybe how are they different from say usual other means of research?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great question. I think again, randomized control trial, if you have to go down how it actually started, right? So it's something that has been borrowed from the medical field, right? So for example, I don't know, any drug that you use, medicine that you're using, right? Whether the drug works or not. I think what they do in the medical field is they run RCTs. They give the drug to a randomized group who gets the program, and the other group that doesn't get the program. Right? So that is something that has been borrowed in the medical field, which has been tested and used. Now, in early 1990s, again, this began to be used in the economics, in the development economics sector. There were a number of programs that were run in Africa, which used, particularly in the deworming stream of studies, that started using RCT in the development sector, right? And again, more systematically, when Vijit and Esther, they got involved, along with Mike and Kramer, they also started doing a lot of RCTs in other parts of the world. And right now, most of our work has been in India. Essentially, what I would say is an RCT is it's an impact evaluation. Just like your difference in difference or regression discontinuity, there are a number of impact evaluation methods. RCT is just one of them. Essentially, what you are doing is you're trying to understand if the goal of the program has been achieved. So in my previous example, if you want to improve learning outcomes of students, say I'm doing this study in Bareilly, I want to improve learning outcomes of students, I'm doing free textbooks. So essentially what I'm trying to understand is, does free textbooks lead to improvement in learning outcomes? It's as simple as that, right? And then I'm trying to understand what is the magnitude of that impact, what is the mechanism, and that, again, those questions are very, very important, as you can imagine, from a public policy perspective, particularly in working for government, right? And just to kind of drill it down, that how RCT, kind of the mechanics of RCT works, essentially what you're doing is you're taking, a sample of program applicants. You are then randomly assigning them to either the treatment group, which gets the program, or the control group, which is not allowed to get the program. So that assignment, who gets the program, that is random, which is the unique feature, right? And essentially what you are doing in this approach is basically you are trying to compare apples to apples, right? So essentially these two groups on average, if they are similar, then any difference that you see at the end would be only because of the intervention that you have given, or your program that you have run. Right? You cannot attribute to anything else, right? And that kind of, but then I think one of the main assumptions that we have is, that in RCT is the fact that provided we have a large enough sample size, again, this goes back to economics that I want to, or econometrics that I don't want to get into, but provided that you have a large enough sample size, and the assignment has happened purely by chance, again, these are things that you can actually test for in an RCT, then these two groups on average are similar, and any difference that you see at the end would be attributable to the program. So in a way, what we kind of think of RCT is the causal mechanism is very, very strong. The internal validity is very strong when it comes to RCT, because we are trying to get rid of any preconceived or pre-underlying differences between the two groups to begin with.
Right.
So,
okay. If, one of the things that we were chatting on earlier as well, Sohini, and just building on from the whole was there a focus for JPAL has been policy evaluation, if I can put it that way, right? Because that feeds into, not just the research bit, but that also informs policy making in general. And that's one of the stated aims that you were mentioning. So can you tell us more about your perspectives on policy evaluation, right? Like, how is it measured, right? When you're trying to measure the effectiveness of a policy and evaluate it, right? Like, how does that thing work?
So again, it can go in different ways, right? I mean, you can working with people who have worked with government, they can understand that there is no set structure. It's not like a linear structure that, there is a policy that is out there, then the government comes to you, and then they get evaluated. I think one of the first things that has to happen if you're running RCT, particularly from JPAL side, is the setup has to happen from very beginning, because you can imagine that if the group is not assigned randomly at the very beginning, then you can't do RCT. So whether we have any of these government schemes or programs, we have a policy team. So it's just not research. We have a policy. So just to kind of quickly go through how the structure of JPAL is. So there is the research team that undertakes research. There is also the policy team, which liaisons with the government, and they kind of help the government understand, policy recommendations. And then you have the training team, where I belong to, and where we train the government in understanding the nuts and bolts of RCT and how that set up. And also on the broader enemy ecosystem. Right? So I think on the policy side, what oftentimes it happens is, when you're working with government, sometimes the government may come to you at the very beginning, right? And when they say that I have this problem, this is the scheme that I am devising, can you help me set it up, right? And there, I think at the very beginning, we will set it up, the random assignment. So in my example, who gets the textbooks? It is randomly assigned. So the treatment group and control group, which of the two groups get the textbooks will be randomly assigned, right? It will not be decided by Yash or Sohini, right? And that's where I think we try to ensure that the individual who gets the program is random, and it's left to chance. That's what we are trying to do. I think the other route is oftentimes the program has happened for some time, right? And that is again, the government has been running this program for last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Then what do you do, right? Then you can you not do RCT? I think the way we kind of come in is, again, if there is if you want to go to a new state, or if you want to kind of add a new treatment arm, or if you're adding something, say for example, you want to give some, so there is a uh, encouragement that you want to provide. Say there is the program involves some sort of filling a form, and that is a very cumbersome exercise. And maybe you want to do some sort of an encouragement design to ensure that your program participants get the program and they're encouraged to fill the form. Again, you can think of an RCT design, but the moot point is you cannot do an RCT if it is not set up from the very beginning. That's like the one technical issue that is at play. But I think at the same time, what we also say is, as an organization, you should not keep on doing RCT. That's one thing, right? That's the research side of things. The idea is not every time the government comes up with a fresh set of problems, you keep on running RCT. That's not the end goal. You can also, and our colleagues have written a lot, and I would encourage some of your listeners to go to the JPAL website. There is this entire, information on generalizability puzzle, which kind of breaks it down, how to do it in a systematic way. Where essentially what we are doing is we use the research that has been undertaken in, say, India, say on say improving learning outcomes, right? On the textbooks and how that improves learning outcomes. If, say, the government of Nigeria has the same set of problem, can they do some sort of a quick needs assessment, some quick formative research, some sort of descriptive data collection at the very beginning, just to make sure that the problems are similar? And if the problems are very similar, then can they use the same mechanism and the same argument to kind of also generalize it to Nigeria? And can there be policy lessons that they can draw from it, right? So the idea is also not to do RCT for every set of questions, but also our team works very closely in helping the government also think from a generalizability lens. So we won't prescribe a fresh set of RCT for every research question to begin with. So we are working.
Awesome. Awesome. And the other prong, the other leg of policy evaluation would be monitoring, as we call it, right? Like you monitor policy and evaluate it. So sorry, maybe I just got the order wrong, but so why don't you tell us more about your experience of working policy monitoring, right? Maybe just continuing from what you were discussing already, and more importantly, so I need some practical examples, right, that people can maybe learn from, or from your very, very long career as well.
So I think monitoring, so as you could, particularly monitoring is very important, just to make sure that even when you're thinking from a program perspective, whether your program is in the hands of the beneficiary, right? You cannot evaluate the program if you don't monitor it. Right? Evaluation is something that you're doing, whether the program that you have is the cause and effect. That's what you're doing in an evaluation, right? If giving free textbooks lead to improvement in learning outcomes, and if I have to simplify it very, very in a very simple line, what I'm trying to say is, if I switch on the light, right, the lamp comes up, right? So it is the switch and nothing else that is causing the light to light up, right? That's essentially what you are trying to do in a program. And you can imagine that can be very, very hard, because you're dealing with human beings. You're not dealing with science apparatus, So that's the evaluation side. But on the monitoring side, I think where we are, I think it's very, very important is to ensure that to understand whether you're evaluating the right program, we have to make sure that the monitoring has happened well, right? And even if you're not evaluating, I think when we always work with government, the government always, they have a vast set of administrative data. There are different data sources that they have. Monitoring becomes very, very important, because they can help them understand that whether the program is working the way they are, like whether the program is reaching the hands of the beneficiary as the way they thought it out to be, right? And here again, I think we work across different routes, right? So one is definitely from the research side when we are running our cities. We also work on making sure that the program is reaching at the hands of the beneficiary when we're working with the governments, NGOs, civil society organizations, etc. Similarly, when we are working, so for example, in the training team, we offer a lot of courses, handholding, work with governments. We have long-term partnerships with several state governments and as well as, organizations such as, DMU, Niti Aayog. We have worked very closely with government of Tamil Nadu, with government of Punjab, government of Odisha, and now with Andhra Pradesh. So we have long-term MOUs with each of them. And our work oftentimes has been on helping government come up with strong monitoring systems, right? And then I would say that, so it's not just one track solution that, we are working on a particular program. It is also on helping the government come up with the right set of tools to monitor the program, right? And here it can be as simple as helping the government come up with something called log frames, right? Come up with the right set of indicators that are in the log frame so that they can measure it well. Because again, it goes back to data, right? How do you know that the program is reaching the hands of the beneficiary? So you should have indicators for that, and you should collect data on that. And you should also track the data so that you can also do course corrections from time to time. Right? I think those are some of the things that we are working with the government to help them understand.
And what would be the 4 or 5 most common mistakes, Sohini, that at least in your opinion, right, that you might have noticed that people, professionals make when handling or processing or even interpreting data pertaining to public policy issues?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends on who you're working with, right? I think more broadly, I would say that oftentimes at the very first stage, right? So at the beginning of the data collection stage, there has to be a thought. Oftentimes we collect data randomly, so there is always a data dump, and you're actually, data is money. Collecting data is very expensive. You're also taking people's time when they're busy, right? So I would say that think about, there should be some theory of change. There should be some underlying theory that is driving you to collect data on a particular set of indicators. So what is that? Get that thinking correct at the very beginning. So it is just not a data dump. Identifying the indicators at the very beginning and being very nuanced about it so that you don't collect on indicators that are unusable later, right? So that's, I think, at the very stage, right? The data collection stage. Then it can be something as simple as, the study design itself, right? So, for example, issues of, sampling bias, right? So, for example, I are doing a study on, say, a political campaign, right? So, but then one political party gets overrepresented and the other gets underrepresented. That, again, becomes a problem. So, making sure that your sampling is done right. That is, again, is another important aspect when it comes to when you're thinking about the data, right? Often, I mean, this is something that often happens in research, that you're cherry picking, right? So when you have a set argument, you kind of cherry pick which some indicators to kind of match to your argument so that, you can push out that particular. And here again, I think we have to be very mindful so that, because cherry picking is not only unethical, but it also has serious consequences, as you can imagine, in the public policy and in kind of the policy recommendations that the article can give, right? And I would also say that communication is also very key, right? So just doing data collection, data analysis is just one part of it, but you should also have a clear message that you're trying to drive, and what is the key message? What is that the data is saying? And I think here you have to be very nuanced and thoughtful. I mean, oftentimes you have, data scientists who are comfortable in producing elegant and engaging dashboards, but I think that only can go so much if you don't communicate the findings in the right way, if you are unable to write succinctly and kind of liaison with the government and help them understand what the data is actually saying. Right? So I think I would think of it more from a cycle approach. And I would think that, and all of us, it's like a continuum, right? All of us are trying to do better in each of those stages. But I think you have to be doing mindful throughout the process is how they would think of it.
Quick aside on that, Sohini, what are some of the most common softwares or tools that people use to do these things, like evaluation, monitoring, interpreting data, capturing, like some common softwares or tools that people can learn to do?
Yeah, so I think it also depends on the discipline. So in my background, I didn't speak. So my background is very different from public policy. My background is actually in political science, and there a lot of SPSS was when I was in grad school. That was the software we used to use, SPSS. Right? I think more. I mean, towards the end of my grad school, we started using Stata. People started using more of Stata. Stata is also more. It's easier to use, right?
Yeah.
As a software,
Yeah.
user friendly. It's not free, so you have to also pay a fee to get package. And there are also free resources like R. So R, particularly when you are using visually
Yeah.
appealing graphs, are the way to go. Again, a lot of these resources are also available online that people can use.
Yeah.
I would also say tools such as Excel are also extremely powerful if you use it in the right way. So again, if you don't have these fancy tools, that's also fine. You can also do Excel, use Excel and use to make the data be a little bit more visual, to kind of do a little bit more analysis. But those are some of the tools that I can think of from the, again, I think other disciplines, like when you go to engineering and all, they have other more sophisticated tools that are oftentimes not used, like Python and all, which are not used so much in economics, but I think these are more commonly available tools that I can think of.
Now, the most important and the most common query that we get all the time on the Sohini is that if someone wants to build a current policy research, right, especially the kind of research that we are talking about, in the sense it is not necessarily very theoretical, right? So say a think tank sort of thing, right? It's more on ground, grassroots, practical, informing policy making, all of that, right? So if someone wants to build a career here, like what's the lay of the land in the sense, what education do they need? What background do they need? Are there any tips, tricks, for the lack of a better?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what I'll say is there's no right way to enter the field. Okay, you can go into the traditional route where you take a course or degree, masters in public policy. Unfortunately, most of the good masters program in public policy are available not in India. I mean, of late there are schools like IIT, IIM, even the National Law Institute in Bangalore. They have a course of public policy. They have public policy courses. Even I think Azim Premji has a public policy course, which are some of the newer schools that provide public policy at the master's level. Sometimes people also have like masters in economics or development. Like for example, TIS has course on development in the country where you can do a master's, and people enter the field from those departments. But I think there are a lot of good programs, and if people are interested in doing GRE and applying abroad, so you have Harvard, you have Yale, they have amazing Columbia, they have amazing public policy, even Oxford, they have amazing public policy schools. I would also say that, I mean, when I went to school, I think that time public policy as a discipline in India to study at the master's level was not even available. So I went down the traditional path. I went to, presidency for my undergrad, political science, then JNU. JNU did not, and they still don't have a public policy school. So I did my master's, my MPhil from JNU on a very traditional political science discipline. And at that point in time, I did not even, to be honest, I didn't even think of entering this field. Right? I was actually more interested in getting into a PhD and getting into academics. That's what interested me. So I went to a PhD program in US, and I was going into the academic one. And I think at some point in time, there was this course on randomized control trials that I had at my grad school, and that really changed my mind and my interest in the discipline and the development sector more broadly. I had because my subfield was political economy, and I did some courses on economics for my subfield PhD. So that kind of made me change and then I applied to JPAL. I came. So my knowledge of the sector actually was on the job. So if you don't, there are two ways in which you can do. Like one would be the more traditional way where you have the discipline, you go to public school and public policy school, and then you enter as an intern. You intern with one of the organizations that interest you, and then you slowly get into the field. You can also do some sort of a land fellowship. You can work with MPs. You can also understand from the working with member of parliament and writing policy briefs how the process happens. Right, that is another. Right, but I think other than that, there are also people like us who have learned the entire public policy or whatever we know in the development sector and whatever we are learning, we have learned from the job. Right. So I think where I think I would encourage all everybody is to kind of think from a motivation perspective. Like, what is it that interests them? Like, why are they interested in the first place? Do they want to work in the sector? And why is it so? And that is for any job, right? So think about that. Think about the tools that they will bring, the strengths that they will bring to the job. Are they motivated and why are they motivated? And customize your SOP accordingly. Because oftentimes I think when we kind of read the SOPs, it's very generic. Like they are reusing the same SOP in multiple places, and you can imagine that doesn't make them stand out, right? The point is they have to explain in their SOP how they want, why are they interested in the job in the first place? Like what really motivates them, right? And what are they bringing to the table and what are they learning? It's not just them motivating, it's also them learning and building their skills. So where do they want to build their skills, right? And how will the job help them in their long-term career goals? So if they can answer some of these questions, that will also help them understand if they want to even enter the field in the first place. So keep reading, keep listening to podcasts that talk about public policy, you know about some of the government schemes that are happening, and understand what really interests them. Are they really interested in spending their life on? I think that is an important question that can then direct them in the right direction, so to say.
Couldn't agree more, Sohini. You touched upon one particular central theme which I keep talking about to people, which is proof of work over proof of education, in a sense, right? That the whole on-the-job learning bit. Although, to be honest, research space is kind of an exception to this, at least the kind of research that think tanks and research institutions do, right? Because there you need like a base level master's or a PhD or whatever, right? But still, like work credentials over just a mere degree any day, like across spaces.
Yash, on this, even if you don't have the right, I have a lot of colleagues who were just fresh out of undergrad, who joined the JPAL research. They were working with, and they were actually interested in getting a PhD. Okay? They wanted to get into the academic route, or they were interested to work more in the development sector, but they didn't have work experience. They didn't even have a master's, right? They just were fresh undergrad who joined JPAL in the research vertical. They worked with the top, affiliates from, Harvard, MIT, which is a big opportunity. You are their RA, right? And they will have their direct supervision and support, their mentoring, right? So they're working on projects and in the process, learning the skill set. So it's not, as I was saying, it's not, see these tools like Stata, Stata, R, people don't know sometimes. That is absolutely fine if you don't know. You learn on the job. But I think what that would mean is you have to be self-started. You have to be motivated and you want to learn this in the first place. So if you don't even have the degree, that's also fine. It's still fine to explore the research route and see if that interests you. Maybe from that exercise, you will feel that, okay, I'm not even interested in research, and that is a good choice, a decision that you come to, right? That's also fine. But I would say that don't get demotivated just because you don't have the background. Because if you are actually interested to build your skill, even if you are just a fresh undergrad, you can always apply to organizations such as ours and get that exposure, build your skill in the process so that you are then better qualified. So even if you're applying for for a master's program, this actually adds to your CV, right? I mean, the fact that you have worked with, say, Abhijit Banerjee, or you have a recommendation for Esther Buffalo, that stands you out from the crowd. That and I have seen a lot of my colleagues actually get into fantastic PhD programs just because they got their mentorship at such a early stage of the life.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Okay, amazing. I know your time is very valuable, so we'll let you go. But thank you so much for taking out the time today. Means a ton, right? And just a small part of the broader efforts that we have. If we can talk to as many interesting people as possible on as many niches as possible, right? And just provide a holistic overview of this still up and coming space, right? I would still say that we're on the cusp of a boom. It's still not there yet, right? At least for public policy in India. For our audiences, thank you so much for joining in. This is Yash. I've been your host. And again, any feedback, any guests we should get next on the show, anything at all, let us know in comments. And thank you for your time. Take care. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you